Hey everyone, it's ENDYMION, and in this video we have quite a bit to cover from the fallout of Concord and how websites are trying to rack their brains to understand why things didn't pan out the way that they thought it would. Beyond this, we have what might end up becoming the next Concord from Sony PlayStation, and Star Wars Outlaws sale numbers are here, and they're not looking great, to put it mildly. Is the post-woke era coming? It looks like it, so let's get into this. Firstly, as you already know, Concord has officially been killed by Sony and will be taken offline Friday, September 6th, until Sony can figure out what exactly to do with the game going forward. Like many people, I too think Sony will simply take the game as it is, make it free to play, and then likely take content that was supposed to arrive in future seasons and place those skins and such behind paywalls in a microtransaction store like every other live service game that is out there right now. Because in case you didn't know, Concord had a roadmap available at launch that detailed all the things that were coming to the game in the near future, such as new characters, maps, and quality of life updates. Firewalk Studios was actually confident enough that its first season of content would hold players over from October 2024 all the way to January 2025. Obviously, this did not end up happening, and the game has died after 2 weeks of retail sale, leading to many asking the question of, well, what happens next? Is Firewalk going to be dismantled and torn apart? Will they stay on Sony's first-party studios lineup? Even though they delivered arguably the worst received PlayStation game in history, my guess is whether Sony makes the game free to play or not, I don't think the game will do well either way. And the abysmal response to the original release proves that the IP is absolutely cooked no matter what they do. I think Concord will simply die, and then that'll be it for them. Like I said in my previous video, it comes down to the character designs. They are simply just god-awful across the board. Like, my god. One user whose name is ArtAttackX, or Sean, is an artist that does some really good work, and he kind of proved right away how pathetic Firewalk's character designs were. Since in around 5 or 10 minutes, he was able to redesign the tank character Amari from Concord and showed his design for the character, which you can now see on screen here. And I think we can all agree that his version of Amari is infinitely better in every conceivable way, and proves right how poorly designed those original designs were. Like, come on, dude. Amari looks like dog water in her official design, and because she looks so bad, why would anyone want to pay money to put new outfits on her? Sean's design immediately feels more dynamic and attractive, and I can see players wanting to actually put cool skins on that character design instead. And before people say players hated Concord because of diversity, no. We just don't like that the characters are ugly as sin, that's all. And the redesign here, it still retains Amari's black skin and all of that, but she looks like an actual woman now. Instead of this weird potato-shaped penguin from the Batman Buzz Lightyear reject thing that they got going on here officially. Like I said in my previous video, Concord needs to change their designs in order to have a fighting chance. But I genuinely believe that neither Firewalk or Sony will be willing to spend the money and time required to actually fix these things. But in reality, it is the only way that this game survives past its original 2 weeks lifespan that it already did. But in order to change the character designs, that would mean that Sony would obviously have to fork out millions of dollars, because they would have to fix the cinematics, all the previously created assets and skins and all of that. And based on the muted response, do we really think that Sony would want to do that, or just move on and cut their losses? Of course, there are people already accusing Sony of not allowing games to live. For example, one IGN writer, whose name is Stella Chung, said this via Twitter. Don't harass this person, by the way, but here's what they said. My heart breaks for Firewalk Studios. The fact that it wasn't even given at least 6 months to properly sit through a season and adjust as a proper live service game is insane to me. It's very clear that PlayStation didn't believe in this from the start and failed to support it. Dear Stella, you're completely wrong, because if anything, Sony actually believed Concord would become their next big thing. If this weren't true, They wouldn't have dedicated an entire state of play to the reveal of the game earlier this year like they did. Not only that, but Sony has an entire episode dedicated to Concord releasing later this year that's a part of Amazon's Secret Level series, which comes from the creators of Love, Death, and Robots on Netflix, if you've seen that before. If anything, Sony believed far too much in Concord than they should have. They actually thought that they had the next big live service shooter on their hands here, and they were likely being gaslighted by the woke executives who were working at Sony's Los Angeles office into believing that this game was the way of the future. And obviously, this was not the case whatsoever. The reason why Concord was axed is simple. It's because it offered nothing new. It looked horrible, and the devs behind it have proven that they hate the general gaming audience like per usual. Remember that one dev who called people who didn't like Concord talentless freaks, which went over about as well as you'd think. Because imagine calling millions of players out there freaks and then wondering why nobody wants to support your game. And don't forget about that one non-binary game dev at Firewalk who forced everyone to call them the Professor, and would push for more diversity and wokeness into Concord than it already had. And they apparently, according to reports, hated people who owned firearms in real life, and was vocally opposed to any staff members who didn't prove that they were vaccinated against COVID-19. Imagine being so woke and out of touch that you are a communist weirdo working at a company owned by a billionaire corporation, making a game about shooting people with guns while saying that anyone who likes guns is an awful person. You can't make this up, man. These people, they are genuinely insane. But this is what Concord has become. You had a game made by openly vocal woke weirdos who wanted everyone to drink up their slop because they felt so entitled to their positions and ideologies that they actually thought that they couldn't do any wrong. They probably thought, well, since everyone around me walks around on eggshells to please me because I'm an adult with the brain of a child, who will scream cancel if I don't get what I want all the time, then surely the general gaming audience will do the same for my needs and wants too, right? And obviously, that hasn't happened, because like I always say, stop catering to woke freaks who hate everyone that isn't like them 100% of the time. You will not become their friends, and they will throw you to the wolves the moment you do anything that goes against their moronic tenets that they live by. Because they are not ordinary people, they are cult members, and cult members tend to flay and eat their own if they do anything that they deem sacrilegious. Concord, to me, it feels like a game that was being held hostage by a bunch of woke weirdos for years. And nobody wanted to tell them no because they feared the repercussions for doing so, but well, you get what you pay for clearly. Of course, IGN wasn't done either. They doubled down further with their other article that's titled, Why Concord Failed. IGN spends the majority of the article saying that the reason why Concord didn't work was because it was a victim of the time that it took to get made. Because if you didn't know, Concord had an 8-year development cycle which started in 2016, the same year that Overwatch released. And looking at Concord, yeah, it's pretty much an Overwatch clone in every way, except the ways that actually matter, of course. I don't personally think time is what killed Concord. I mean, it's just a 6v6 multiplayer shooter game, that's all it really is. Overwatch actually has different modes, and comparing Concord to other free-to-play offerings, I mean Fortnite. That game has like Battle Royale, a whole rock band mode, racing minigames, and tons of Halo Forge map-like experiences. Not to mention you have stuff like Apex that also has Battle Royale and other modes that are very similar to Concord as well, and they're free-to-play. The truth is simply that Concord offered nothing new whatsoever, and like I keep saying, it always comes back to those character designs and the pronouns and the wokeness. Which of course, none of these articles will ever mention once as being the main cause for failure. Because if they do, then the other cult members will zero in on them and then eat them alive for saying the truth. So instead of objectively saying why things are happening, we have to instead lie and act like we don't all know the reason why. Oh, it's cause it took years to make, like every other game in existence, it was chasing trends. Oh really? So like every other AAA game in existence too. But completely ignore the fact that the cast looks like rejected Guardians of the Galaxy characters. And don't say that because then you're a bigot and you're an awful person. How dare you say that? Look at all the diversity on display. You should be clapping. Why aren't you all clapping? Can't you just be a good stupid consumer and open your mouths and close your eyes and swallow the gravy like a good consumer does? After all, we only exist to open our wallets to buy the crap these people give us, apparently. And if we all ever voice our opinions, we just get blacklisted and attacked for the rest of time. Thankfully, the world is waking up to these shenanigans and it's not working as well anymore thanks to places like Twitter being full of free speech as well. We can actually talk about the real issues without some woke freak who thinks they're an animal silencing your voice for hate speech. By the way, random sidestep here, does anybody else remember that one Twitch person who was in charge of hate speech laws or something like that? And they thought that they were like a deer or something? Am I going crazy or was that a real thing? It was, wasn't it? Man, comparing the crazy then to now is wild, dude, but that's how these things happen. We need to put our foot down and say no to insane demands more often because the more we normalize these behaviors of allowing crazy stupid things to get made, the worse things will get. If these weirdos had their way, then every game would look and act like Concord does, pronouns would be everywhere, and every character would have LGBTQ+ skins that just look like someone drank a rainbow and then vomited all over the character models. Everybody is simply sick of these things, full stop. We don't want to support these things anymore. We don't want Concords or Suicide Squads or Dustborns. We want games that don't talk down to us, don't remind us of current day politics or whatever else. But what can we do when the game industry is so hell-bent on ensuring that no matter what you do, you cannot escape these concepts? Look at the Game Developer Conference, or GDC for short. It's a big show where game devs from all over, they come together to discuss games and show off their new projects and teach up-and-coming devs how things work. And the fact that about half of GDC at this point is quite literally just gender and identity politics pandering TED Talks, which I'm not kidding by the way, it's rampant in these conferences. It really doesn't surprise me. Like the fact that one of these conferences, which someone anonymously snapped a picture of, it kind of proves my point perfectly. At the GDC, they had what was called the Game Narrative Discussion, which had slides that unironically said on them, "End white cisgender able-bodied men as the default." Yeah, that's a real slide in an actual presentation at a conference that is hosted to teach thousands of game developers how to make video games in the future. You think that's not bad enough? Well, here's another slide that says, "Video games are political. The way we make games is political. The way that we teach our students to make games is political." And notice in the bottom right there that this slide comes from a presentation called "Teaching Students to Make Socially Aware Games." They are beating and roundhouse kicking this nonsense into the brains of these young game developers from the get-go, my dear viewer. Also, shout out to Mongoloyer who shared these screenshots on Twitter by the way, but this is what I've been talking about. These ideologies are being normalized and regurgitated onto impressionable minds from the get-go. How can you be surprised that slop like Concord or Dustborn exists? Knowing that anyone who works there at a junior to intermediate level has likely been raised and forced to normalize these concepts. That every game is political, activism is paramount above everything else, and that game development needs to end white cisgender males as a default audience. Which, looking at Concord, has 0 white male characters in it at all. And before you say, what about Tio? He's South American, so he's not exactly white himself either. Look, Concord is, from its design, UI, characters, messaging, all of it would get a 10 out of 10 if it was being presented at GDC right now. It has all the bells and whistles that these identity political talks are pushing, and that's what scares me the most and why I keep fighting like I do. Because this crap is so ingrained into modern gaming that it will take years to uproot and replace it. And it's why it's so important that we call it out, inform, and make sure that everyone knows exactly which games are being made, for which reason, by which people. Because if we don't do it, history will just repeat itself, and then 10 more Concords will happen. They may not all be live service shooters, but they will exist nonetheless unless we actually do something about it. For example, Sony is apparently not done with slop live service games either because enter Fair Games. So this is a game that is being spearheaded by Haven, a studio founded by Jade Raymond. She used to work at Ubisoft on stuff like Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs, and as you see the trailer, which is on screen right now, you can clearly tell that this just looks like Ubisoft DLC nonsense. I have no idea why Sony is funding games like this. Apparently they have high hopes that Fair Games or Fair Game, whatever this crap is called, but it looks dead on arrival too. You play as thieves taking money from billionaires in some weird PvE meets PvP-like game where other players can hunt you down and take your money for themselves too. It just looks so painfully generic, and the outfits, they scream Watch Dogs, and so too does the character designs. You got the main character, who's yet another diverse woman of color, who's also likely a girl boss and probably lesbian too. They even show near the end of the trailer that another group is wearing monkey masks. Like, this is straight up looking like Watch Dogs Legion's DLC. I'm not even kidding, dude. And if this game has a price tag attached to it as well, then fellas, we're looking at the next big mega flop from PlayStation again. They seriously need to stop chasing these live service games, or at the very least give people what they really want. The fact that Last of Us Factions was cancelled, yet Concord and Fair Games was given the okay, is wild to me. At least Factions has some brand potential built into it, and people would at least want to check it out since it's a part of that Last of Us universe. But I guess instead you get Guardians of the Bathroom and Watch Dogs DLC instead. I hate it here, man. So many games want you to live in their world and play them all the time. It's just not feasible anymore. One of the things that I agreed with when it came to that Why Concord Failed article from IGN is that the writer there says that the industry needs to make smaller games, and I agree. We need less fully priced games that take 7 to 10 years to make. We need games that are shorter experiences, that are more so in the $30 to $40 range, that offer unique experiences instead, because not everything can or needs to be The Witcher 3. And there's not enough room to be making games that will take 8 to 10 years so that they can rival something like Fortnite, because trust me, man, you will not dethrone Fortnite. It's just far too ingrained into the public consciousness at this point. It has too much brand recognition, too much variety, and it costs literally nothing to play it. You can never beat free. I don't care who or what you are, it's impossible. Another thing that a lot of these live service games seems to forget is that a large audience for these sorts of games are in fact children, and kids usually don't have a lot of money, but they will play stuff. And Concord costing $40 out of the gate was an Achilles heel that they would never recover from, and clearly it led to their downfall. Speaking of downfalls, we also got to talk about Outlaws, because that is not going over well either. According to some reports like this one from Park Place, Star Wars Outlaws is underperforming in places like the UK by over 50% when compared to previous Star Wars releases like Jedi Survivor. This is indeed not a good sign for obvious reasons. But it actually gets even worse, because apparently this is not a UK only thing, but Outlaws is underselling across the board, and Ubisoft stock has plummeted to a 10-year low recently because of it. As one JP Morgan analyst said, Star Wars Outlaws has struggled to meet our sales expectations despite positive critical reviews. Well, I wouldn't say very positive, but mid-70s is fine, I guess. According to the same report from Reuters.com or Routers, I can never say the website right anyways, Outlaws had a 30% higher budget than Assassin's Creed Mirage, yet its Twitch viewership is also 50% below Mirage's in the same period, and has not made as much money as Mirage either. And because of this, analysts are lowering their sales expectations from that same article source by around 2 million units. They now believe that Outlaws will sell 5.5 million units by March 2025. A reminder that Black Myth Wukong broke 10 million units sold in 4 days. Outlaws will barely reach even half of that in the next 8 projected months of retail. This is not going well for Ubisoft, obviously, and it's for the same reasons as to why Concord, Dustborn, and so many others have failed too. They're simply not giving people what they wanted. They wanted Kay Vest to look like the actor. Ubisoft instead gave you the Warriors guy who jangles the bottles instead. The game is also apparently very bare bones. I mean, you know things are bad when Kotaku can't even defend your game in their reviews, which is really, really bad, man. The exact number of Ubisoft stock falling is 12.6% right now as of the making of this video. I am guessing that it will probably drop further by the time you're seeing this though. This puts Ubisoft's stock share price at around $15 per share right now, which is yet again a 10-year low for the company. And remember guys, that Assassin's Creed Shadows still has to release this November, and I really don't think it's going to move the needle much either. The IGN and Routers, whatever article both state also that Ubisoft's other game XDefiant is also bleeding players and is not recovering despite a strong launch in May 2024. So it's clear that a lot of live service games are simply just not working out well for any of these companies. But the through line that connects every single game that I've spoken about here in this video is the same. They are all woke diversity pushed games that are offering nothing new and launch with little content like Concord, or in buggy states with repetitive combat and bad stealth like in Outlaws' case. The modern audience is not showing up to support these games because they do not exist, despite what these companies like to think. And the death spiral of woke ideology has never been more prevalent than it is right now. Nobody wants to buy or play these games, and the games that are doing the best are the ones that just give you a good time, no alcohol required, like Wukong does. I mean, Space Marine 2 is launching very soon as well, so I guess we'll see if that game ends up living up to the hype. But as you can see, dear viewer, the age of the post-woke era is indeed upon us. These companies will need to learn to adapt and abandon these moronic ideals if they want any hope at success in the future. Whether they want to admit it or not, like those GDC slides, it is fact not the end of the cisgender, white, able-bodied male audience. Because if you reject a paying customer, it seems like nobody, regardless of skin or gender, will show up to save you from complete and utter oblivion. So rest in peace to Concord. Star Wars Outlaws will definitely be getting price reductions before long, and fair games or fair game is likely going to be yet another modern audience seeking mega flop that will just be a repeat of Concord again. Maybe I'm wrong, but so far I am unfortunately right on the money most of the time. It is, as they say, the curse for being so based, but I can't help it, guys. The baseness, it runs in my Slavic European genes. To deny my baseness is like to deny a bird its right to fly with its wings. I am simply dictated to reject the wokeness of the world based on my DNA. Reject the pandering, dear viewer, and embrace good old-fashioned gaming always. They are losing, we are winning, and it's as good a time as any to let our nuts hang and keep winning the good fight. So as always, thank you for watching, subscribe and all of that. Thanks to everyone who supports me, it means the world to me, and have a wonderful day. And I'll see you soon.